why is change so hard? I'm Dan with the Perspective Project, and today we're considering the perspective of Dr. Lisa Barrett, a neuroscientist and psychologist from Northeastern University. And today I've gathered some clips from her speaking about change and the metabolic processes that go on inside the brain. So today we're answering the question, why is change so hard? It turns out that there is a metabolic and predictive explanation of stuckness, of why it's hard to change, how to move from one place where we are right now to where we want to go. So let's hear her thoughts on it.
Like the biggest costs that your brain expends energy on are moving your body, learning something new, and dealing with persistent uncertainty. Those are really expensive things for us.
So in this video, Dr. Barrett explains the three most expensive things that our brain does that uses energy. She explains that the top three things are moving our body, learning something new, and dealing with uncertainty. And so here we learn that change requires a lot of energy. Two of the three, if not three of the three, involve change. When a human undergoes the process of change, they're learning something new. They're replacing an old way of living, an old way of life for a new one. And to couple this, they have to deal with uncertainty. It's like a narrative arc in literature. Whenever a person undergoes a change, they go through a process called the liminal stage. And that liminal is what is happening when the person hasn't fully yet established themselves in their new role, but also hasn't fully left their old role. It's the in-between. And during that stage, they're up for vulnerability. Their once firm ground has been shaken. And so this yields a lot of uncertainty. And from Dr. Barrett's comments, we learn that this is expensive. It costs the brain most of its energy. She then states something interesting about another thing that stands in our way.
So if you're metabolically encumbered in some way, say you're depressed, or you have anxiety disorder, or maybe you have heart disease or diabetes, or you're living under chronic stress, you don't have the spoons necessarily to take in prediction error. You're just going to go with your predictions. You aren't going to learn. You aren't going to be able to update those predictions.
You're going to be stuck.
You're going to be stuck in your head.
So Dr. Barrett goes on to name a few both mental and physical disorders. And she explains that with all of the brain's use of energy dealing with those disorders, it leaves less and less energy for us to change. Less and less energy to move our body, learn something new, or deal with uncertainty. So if we're depleted, we're struggling with things like depression or anxiety, or even chronic pain or stress. She says we don't have the spoons to process prediction error, and uses the term prediction error, which is a psychology term that references the brain. In psychology, the brain is seen as an expectation-driven tool. In order to conserve energy, the brain utilizes habit and previous experience to expect what the future is going to be. Think of the example of a person trying to get in shape. If they set a goal to get home from work and go to the gym, they'll run into a few problems. One of which, revolving prediction error, is their past experience and their past behavior. If in the past they had a habit of coming home from work and turning on the TV, sitting on the couch and eating, then that is what their brain expects. Not only their brain, but their whole metabolic system will be anticipating that. Their stomach will be preparing to receive food, their body will be preparing to sit down, and their mind will be preparing to turn off in a state of consuming entertainment. And so all of this metabolically goes against their goals of trying to go to the gym. And so when they make that mental effort to stop their normal routine and say, today I'm going to the gym, Their whole metabolic system is dealing with uncertainty. Their expectation has been wrong. And that is what they call prediction error, when your brain expects something that's not happening anymore. And so although that is useful and all that is great for the person to go to the gym, a key understanding that is important to know about that process is that it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of mental willpower for that person to overcome those tendencies and make it to the gym. So when other people have things in their life that they're exerting their mental and metabolic energy on, they have less and less energy to spend it on things like moving your body, learning something new, or dealing with uncertainty. So I hope with this knowledge that we're talking about, you gain a little compassion for yourself. You can realize that you're not just avoiding change because you may be lazy, but you're actually avoiding change because there's a lot happening underneath the hood. Your brain is designed to protect you from metabolic bankruptcy, energy depletion. And so really it's a survival tactic. That doesn't mean it excuses us from changing, but it's important to be aware of. So now that we know that our brain runs on predictions from our past, we can assume that in order to change our behavior, it requires prediction error, and that costs energy. So when we're under chronic stress or illness, our brain just can't afford it. Ultimately, the past is metabolically cheaper than the unknown. So let's hear a little more from Dr. Barrett about what she's talking about.
Right? Every experience, every action, a combination of the remembered present, the remembered past, the predictions, and the sensory present.
So Dr. Barrett explained that human behavior is a combination of the remembered past and the sensory present. So the remembered past isn't just the memories we hold in our brain, but it's our subconscious. All of our lived experience has been consolidated into our mind and into our metabolic system. Not just how our mind operates, but also how our body operates. So our behavior is a combination of that, the expectations about this reality that our brain creates based on the previous reality we've lived, and then our current sensory experiences. That is the senses we're receiving in the present moment through our eyes, our nose, our feeling, and our ears. I've added here a few studies that help us understand just what this entails with the brain and the process of change. There's a study that found that our brain uses 20% of our whole body's energy while only being 2% of the body's weight. Another study also found that anxiety, depression, inflammation, and chronic stress all impair neuroplasticity, which has to do with change. So all of that makes it harder to update our predictive models. So from the research and science, you can be rest assured that our brain isn't a reaction machine, rather it's a prediction machine. We're anticipating things before they even happen. And so in order to change, we have to be super aware of this process, of what's actually happening in our brain and in our metabolic system. In order to change, you have to interrupt that prediction loop. You must understand what must be coming for your brain and body. Taking it back to the example of the person trying to get in shape. If that person ends his workday coming home with low energy and low motivation, he's going to be rocked when he gets home and he realizes that his body doesn't want to go to the gym. He faces not just the thoughts and emotions of not wanting to go to the gym, but also the metabolic weight of his prediction errors. So in order for him to be successful, he needs to be aware of what's going on in his brain. And when he gets home, he needs to expect that wall he's going to run into and bolster the motivation and the willpower to move past it in order to reach his goals. It's important to understand that that roadblock is something that we'll be facing time and time again until our new selves replace our old selves. We get out of that liminal state. So with this in mind, from the research of Dr. Barrett, I want you to have a little different approach to the change that you're trying to make in your life. I have this one tip for you, and it is to start with capacity, not discipline. Sometimes when you talk about change or transformation, There's a lot of the conversation focused on discipline, willpower, motivation, but all of those things in our brain and metabolic system, we've learned they're finite. And so you have to understand that you have a capacity for all of these things. And so instead of just trying to push through, try and work with the system your brain already has set in place. Focus on your energy. Focus on things like sleep, nutrition, and regulation. So that when the moments come that you face prediction error and you have to do things you haven't done before, you have more energy to succeed. When you focus on energy, you reduce the friction before increasing effort. It's all about the idea of thinking smarter, not harder. And there are big and small ways you can help couple this with trying to teach your brain to get used to prediction errors. Small novelty cues like brushing your teeth with your other hand or taking a new route to work. All of these things jostle the brain and metabolic system up a little bit because we're doing things out of routine. If we want to change our lives are going to be out of routine. It's in the nature of change. But in order to be successful and hopeful in that pursuit, we need to be aware of the processes and systems our brain and body have set in place. So ask yourself these questions. What predictions are you clinging to in your life? What might be possible if you had more energy? And how can you add safety to the unknown? I believe that we don't fear change. We only fear being unprepared for what it demands. And that's because a lot of us don't understand what it demands. So I hope today's lesson from the perspective of Dr. Barrett helped you gain some compassion for yourself. And moving forward, I invite you to start with capacity, not discipline, trusting that the discipline will come later. I'm Dan with the Perspective Project, and today we learn from the perspective of Dr. Lisa Barrett. It's my belief that we as humans are a construct of reality. We don't act in reality as it is, but we act on our perception of it. That is our perspective. And so in order to change our reality, we need a different perspective. So that's what I'm doing for myself and helping you to do for yourself, helping us change one perspective at a time.